You know, occasionally we work an investigation that tugs at your heartstrings, and occasionally we work investigations that break your heartstrings. And this investigation really breaks your heartstrings because you can't imagine that anyone could treat another human being like this. And you really can't imagine that the person who, or persons who would treat another human being like that would treat their child like this. But here's what occurred. Wednesday, November the 16th, at about 3:30 in the afternoon, there was a 17-year-old victim who was found in the woods screaming and hollering for help. And so some people cautiously went over there to see what was going on, and they discovered this young lady who was absolutely frightening to look at. She'd been beaten. She had these huge, open, gaping wounds on the top of her feet. She had a broke shoulder, and she had a stab wound in her other shoulder. She was 86 pounds. Her hair was falling out. And after we interviewed her, we found out she wasn't allowed to take a bath since last March. And here's what happened. She lived with her father, Chris Peters, and her stepmother, Melissa Peters, at their home. And they didn't feed her. They locked the food in the cabinets. And occasionally they would let her have a Pop-Tart to eat. So they starved her, and they beat her, and they had a rod, a pole, and as a result, they would hit her on the top of the feet and injure her. Her wounds were significantly infected. She was taken to the hospital, the local hospital, and from there transferred to Lakeland Regional, where from the 16th until today, the 21st, 5 days, she's already gained 11 pounds. They said she's eaten nonstop. She is responding to care. She's going to have surgery on her feet. She's going to have surgery on her shoulder. She said that they wouldn't let her go to the bathroom. She would have to either urinate on the floor or in her clothes or both. The detective said when she told them that she hadn't been allowed to take a bath since March, they could understand that because of the physical condition that she was in. Physically, she's going to survive. She's going to have surgeries. Emotionally, we don't know how she'll be in the long run. They said she's an absolute delight to deal with in the hospital. She's so appreciative of everything that is being done for her. Well, we interviewed Chris and Melissa, and do you know they had the nerve to tell us that this 17-year-old child did it to herself, created all those issues, starved herself, injured herself, picked at her injuries. And then we go, okay, so did you take her to the hospital? And the results were no. Did you take her for medical care? No. They're locked up in jail where they belong. There's a 15-year-old son that wasn't receiving that same treatment. And for those familiar with investigations know that that's not uncommon, that one child will be abused and neglected, and another may not. Well, I can tell you that when we talked to both of the parents and they said, well, it's her fault, the victim's fault, they all had answers, but of course the answers didn't square up. The 15-year-old actually tried to defend the parents. We also have him in some intense therapy as well because of the environment that he was subjected to. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't imagine an environment where you would starve a child. I can't imagine an environment where you would beat a child, break a child's arm, stab a child, use a child for a punching bag. But that's what we saw. And she's alive today because she saw the opportunity to escape. You see, the parents would hand off watching her, so someone was always with her. Well, Mom was gone on this particular occasion, and Dad did not pay close attention to her, and she noticed that Dad wasn't paying attention, and that's when she ran out the door. Dad ran out after her, tried to get her to come back in the house. If you'll come back in, we'll feed you. He started trying to be nice to her, but she ran from him. Obviously, people heard her screaming in the woods about a mile from her house, notified the sheriff's office. And then the parents called and said, our daughter's missing. Well, they knew they were in trouble then because obviously we would have, once we found the daughter, then there would be lots of questions to ask. And we've asked lots of questions, and we've not gotten a satisfactory answer to any of those questions. The investigation is ongoing. The investigation is ongoing as to how that child could have been treated like that. And we're fortunate that she's alive. She would not have been alive much longer had she not fled and run for her life. And that's exactly what she did.
How long do you believe this abuse has been going on?
She says she has been abused for 7 or 8 years. But the intensity of the abuse apparently started around March, February or March of this year, where it got to the point where she was being beaten, refused food, and it has gotten more severe as time went on. So the psychological abuse is there. There had been an intervention early, very early in the year at school, and she was nourished at the time, not malnourished, but she was nourished at the time and said, no, everything's okay, no problems. But it went downhill sometime in February or March.
And nobody reported her missing from school, that she hadn't shown up for school? Or?
That's still under investigation. We don't have the details of that yet. But they withdrew her from school. We're still in the beginnings that's the questions we're asking today is what happened when they withdrew her, because see, at 16, I believe it is, you can withdraw from school. But they withdrew her from school, or she was withdrawn from school. So we're looking into all of this now. To say we're shocked is an understatement. To say we're outraged is an understatement. But you know what? She saved her own life that day, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that she is in an environment that's safe and secure, so that environment never exists again for her. We're working with DCF at this time. DCF is working not only with her, but with a younger brother, because certainly we think there's psychological issues where they have brainwashed him, for lack of a better term, as well.
What's going to happen to her? I mean, she's 17. Can she go to foster care? Does she have family?
She's moved. They moved here from Michigan. Dad is a Chippewa Indian, The children are Chippewa Indians. The stepmom is not. We've also made contact with the Chippewa Nation, and we'll be working through them as well to make sure that, and they have a system, I'm not sure what the system is, but they have a system to take care of folks that are in the Chippewa Indian tribe. So we're going to be working with them as well. But you can be sure of one thing. We're not going to let that child go anyplace other than a safe and secure environment. And only after she's well enough to do so. Right now, she's still at the hospital being treated for significant malnutrition and for injuries that you can't even imagine. She said at one point in the investigation, she said that they treated their dog better than they treated me.
Have deputies been to that home before?
I don't know. I don't know if it was us or Haines City Police had an intervention sometime in January, but there was none of the malnutrition, there was none of the injuries. There was, and she said everything was fine. But once again, you've got to understand that goes to the psychological brainwashing of the child and the abuse. And when she ran to the park, when she ran outside, her dad said, "If you don't come back, you know I'll be in trouble." So he even tried to beg her not to run when he found her outside because he knew he would be in trouble.
The intervention, what was that?
It was a complaint that came in about,
From a teacher?
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. But we went through the normal processes, and she denied that there was anything wrong. And physically, she was fine. All of this has occurred since Marchish area through the 1st of November.
You mentioned Haines City Police. Is that because her school would be in the city limits, or?
I don't know if it's because that's where she attended school. And we apparently were involved with it then as well. And this was not there. Obviously, if there was any indication, if there was an iota of an indication, we would have dealt with this in whenever it was, January or February. But this started downhill apparently in March because she said she had not been allowed to bathe since March.
How long have they lived in Polk County?
I don't know. But I can tell you this, Mom and Dad are going to live in Polk County for a while in the jail. And then we're going to do our best to send them to state prison where they can live in state prison for a long while. But our number one focus right now is for this 17-year-old girl and her health and well-being. And like I said, to say she's thriving, she is responding well to treatment. They say, you know, as you can imagine, to gain 10 pounds 11 pounds in less than a week. But had deadbolt locks on the cabinets to keep them from getting the food to eat. Can you imagine? Can you even imagine deadbolting the cabinets to keep the children from having food and then giving them a Pop-Tart? She said occasionally that's the kind of thing you obviously we can't show the pictures, but you would be totally outraged, totally heartbroken to think that anyone could treat anyone like that, much less treat your child, your own child, like that.
You said there's still a lot of things you're looking into and you're not getting answers from them, but do you have any idea why they would treat her like this?
You know, I could give you a lot of subjective statements of why they would treat her like that. They're not human. They're animals. But I don't think that's a medical or a legal definition for why they would treat their daughter or their stepdaughter like that. But there's a lot of work to do on the case. And we have the child, she's safe. We have the 15-year-old, he's safe. And they're not going back to that filthy, nasty, despicable environment that we found when we served the search warrants at the residence.
When you look at that neighborhood, that house from the outside, I mean, you would never know, because it's a fairly decent-looking neighborhood.
It
It's a
is.
nice neighborhood, and the house from the outside appears to be.
And it's an absolute total mess on the inside. I mean, it doesn't take much thought about what condition someone's got to be in that's not been allowed a bath since March and has urinated on themselves when they weren't allowed to go to the bathroom. It outrages us. You know, I can't use the words or the inflection I would like to, but what you can't understand is, how did he do that to his daughter? And how did the stepmom allow that to happen? They deserve to be in prison for the rest of their lives. They really do. They don't need to ever have access to children again. Ever. And then, once the physical injuries are healed, how about the mental injuries? How about what they've put this daughter through, and the son or the brother who's witnessed this and is trying to defend mom and dad? And if you accept all of their story on face value, which has no validity to it, then why didn't you get her help? You ignored her. You left her in her room. She wouldn't have been alive very much longer. She would have died had she not run and saved her own life that day. So when people tell you that in 2016 there's no such thing as people running and hiding in the woods to stay alive from things they fear or people they fear, it's not true. She ran through the woods for a mile to stay alive. And it was unbelievable. It has shaken our most experienced detectives to the soul when they saw this young lady and the way she was treated. It has shaken them to their very soul. Anything else? Y'all have a good day.